Righty. So as usual, these are very, very interactive sessions. First off, thank you so much, guys, for joining. Thank you for always being here. Looking forward to learning from all of you. And today's topic is a very interesting one, which we're gonna discuss more about types of tests and why we need to write tests in our applications. So yeah, we kick it off with the first type of test. Or rather, before I even continue, who knows how many types of tests are there in Flutter? Please feel free to unmute your mic and just tell us what you know about tests in Flutter. I think I can start. Yeah, please go on.
From my knowledge, I know of unit tests, which test the functionality of individual either functions or classes within your application. Then we have widget tests, which maybe in other UI libraries, or maybe in web and other UI, our front-end world, maybe it's called component tests, which basically just tests. In Flutter, it will test how if the widget works as expected. And then we have integration tests, which test the whole app, or basically bigger chunks of the app. The main function of integration tests are tests whether the different maybe widgets and classes and functions interact with each other as expected. So those are the three I know of.
Great. And yeah,
I know in software engineering there are many other kinds of tests, but in Flutter those are the ones that I have interacted with.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And have you tried to write any of them, to see how your code base maybe is interacting?
Yes, I have written a number of tests, especially unit tests and widget tests. In the few Flutter packages that I've written, I've had to write widget tests to just make sure that the widgets or the widgets that I've built are working as expected, so that there are no surprises in production.
Oh, great. Cool. Thank you so much for that. I think you're absolutely correct on that. And then there was something else that I saw, I was just digging deep and to see the type of test that exists, and then there's something they're calling widget behavior tests, golden tests, performance tests. Does that do you know more about that? And is there any insight you could probably give on that? Danvik?
From my maybe limited knowledge, I think I've heard of golden tests, which are basically just like unit tests, but I don't know if I'm getting this correct, but it's maybe from my knowledge is that golden tests basically write the output of what has been happening, maybe to file or something like that. I'm not very sure. If someone is shown that, maybe they can let us know. But I usually find that maybe all these other kinds of tests may be categorized somehow as integration tests. If you look into it, basically you can categorize them into either component tests or integration tests. I feel like most of them are just variations of the same. I'm not very sure if they are very much distinct from the ones that we have mentioned, and unless someone else has more insight.
Okay, cool. I think from what I see from definition, like they're saying the widget behavior test, the widget, also known as interaction test, they simulate the user interaction with widgets and verify the expected behavior. Like these tests are written, they're also written using the Flutter test package and can be used to test gestures, animations, and user inputs, like basically the behavior of that particular application. And from what you've explained about golden test, they're used to compare the visual outputs of a widget against a known golden image. I don't know what they mean by a known golden image. They capture a snapshot of the rendered UI and compare it with a previously approved image. They also use the Flutter test package, which provides support for the golden test. I think you weren't like far off from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wasn't, but I think I'm glad that I'm learning a few more. I've only done the ones that are there.
Yeah. And then there is something else they're calling performance test. So this type of test, it evaluates the performance characteristics of your application, such as rendering speed, memory usage, or network latency. Wow, this is something I never thought. And then Flutter offers tools like the Flutter driver package and integration with performance profiling tools like Dart Observatory and Flutter dev tools for writing and analyzing performance tests. Whoa, did anyone ever think about this? I mean, I know like developers mostly, there's some devs that focus on how your application is draining your battery and such stuff, but I didn't quite think like they could write like a test on that to test like the performance of the app. So this is where the performance tests come in. All right, do we have any questions on that?
Just maybe a contribution rather than a question.
Mm-hmm.
I've also tried driver tests, which driver tests, I think it's some form of integration test. I'm not very sure, but the main purpose is just to make sure that basically you will have the driver, which is basically simulates a user, and it will run the application either on an emulator. Basically, the whole application will run either on an emulator or a real device, and it will basically tap around. Basically give it instructions on what to do. Basically, like go to this input this, click this button. You'll be seeing your device or your emulator doing that. You're not touching it, it's doing that, and then you just assess and basically try to see if it will run the whole application as you intended it to work. It's actually a very good. I've done that. It's actually a very good way of testing your applications, and I am somehow convinced that that is what happens when you maybe submit your application to Play Store, where basically they have several devices running your application, basically doing robot tests or basically driver tests, making sure that basically your app responds, something like that. If anyone has more information, maybe they can share.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I feel like that's an interesting way, like to have your test first running before submitting it, which still is gonna go through the test either way from the Play Store. But okay, I think if anybody has like more insights on that, it would be really nice to like know more. And also any questions, please drop them. However, for today's session, I would like to take through the unit testing. So what is this unit test? I think Danvik really explained pretty well what unit test is. So it's like a process of evaluating everything. and verifying it and make sure that the software or your application that does what it's supposed to do. It's giving you the output that it's supposed to give you. One of the things about it, it helps prevent the bugs and reduce the development cost. However, there's somebody who said testing shows the presence and not the absence of bugs. So basically that's like the whole purpose of writing tests. And yeah, testing is the art of verification. So what is this unit test? So this is a part of automated test process where small units of code are tested with several use cases for their reliability. And a unit may be anything like a function or a method or a class or a variable. So when you hear us saying unit test, don't think it's something that you haven't really used. These are things that you probably interact with all the time, like functions and methods and classes and states, and variables. Yeah. So we want to learn how to test those particular units. And unit test is the bottommost layer in the test world. It's the most basic type of test when it comes to Flutter, because we're basically testing the nitty-gritties of what we use in day-to-day life to write our code. And all the internal working of every feature are tested here. And another thing to note is whenever you're writing your test, it probably takes a few steps for you to arrive into what you want to start. For example, you need to arrange what you want to test. This is create and set up the unit and test or whatever it is that you want to test. And then the act, this is where you run the unit with some state. And then assert, this is where you verify whether the unit behaves as expected. Maybe all this is jargon, but let me try presenting my screen. I'm also still learning this thing, so we learn together here. Let's see if this is the correct thing. Could you kindly present something, or even? Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, so I hope you can view my screen. So is my screen visible, by the way?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so this is an example of a unit test that I was trying to write down. So we have this is the main application whenever you're running your app, the counter app rather. So we want to try and write do a test for the counter. So here's an example of a counter class, and this is very, very simple. We have values, an integer and an increment and a decrement. But now how do we go about testing for this particular class? We write it on the test folder. And another thing to note is whenever you're writing your test, there is this folder here that basically covers that for you. And for whatever class or function that you need to write on, you have to include the name test.dat, the name of the function you want to test on, and then include the test.dat name or something. I hope that's clear. So yeah, this is an example of the counter class that we wish to test. And as you can see here, we've already initialized it and written some function that we hope to see. Before I go ahead with maybe explaining from how I understand it, is there anyone like who understands what's written here on this particular type of example? Maybe Danvik?
Sorry, I was muted. So from my understanding, when doing tests, you can there's the group statement, which basically you can group multiple tests. If you have multiple tests, you can group them together so that let's say it's functionality to read the counter, for example, and you have multiple kind of tests from decrement, the initial. So group will just allow you to group multiple tests and test them together. And then there's the word expect, which has two sections. The function expect has the function. The first one is basically called, I think, the actual, which is what is happening, and then the second one is basically the expected value. So expect is a function that when you give it the first value and the second one, it will basically make sure that the expectation is met. For example, on line 6, the expect statement is given the counter, like basically an instance of the counter object's value, and then it is given the second bit is basically what you expect. So if the two match, then your tests pass, and if they don't, then the test will fail.
Yes, correct. Well, I think you've like literally explained it all. So yeah, for this particular function, and then we have the main function here. Can you also like expand on the main function that we have here?
Okay, in any Dart file, usually the main function, or in any Dart, let's say that library, may
Sorry, you're breaking a bit.
the entry point of, oh, sorry. Let me get closer to my internet. Now, in any library, in that, main is usually the function that is called, that will call other functions or other parts of the code. So basically that's just the entry point into for this instance, the entry point into this specific test.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yes, correct, kabisa. Thank you, Danvik, for expounding that. Anyone with any kind of question? No, yes.
Maybe to offer more of the same perspective, I think there was something I was learning, I think yesterday, about the arrangement of how you're supposed to test, and it was basically saying that you should do sort of a AAA sort of arrangement of action. So you start by arranging and then acting and then asserting, which is what Danvik has mentioned, which is like when you have the final counter as the counter, that's the arrangement. So you've basically declared what variables you're going to use in this test. And then you act, which is the counter.increment, which is basically just running the function. And usually, like doing the counter.increment also works, but what I've seen is like you assign that to a value, and then in the expect, which is now the last part of it, which is asserting that whatever you're going to put into the bracket is the truth, which is the variable that you're that you're testing on, and then the value that's contained in that variable is the expecting that both match. That's basically the assumption. So if you're writing a function that in something that actually returns a value, So like what you have here is an object, and then you're calling a function on that object. But if you're calling like an actual function that's supposed to return something, let's say like a future, you would basically write maybe like variable x is equals to my function, and then expect the variable, expect the value that comes from that, and then in the last step you just assert that whatever the value was returned, it matches the value that you provide at the end of it. So sort of the same perspective, just expanding on it.
Cool. So if I may ask, like do you like have maybe an example of an explanation of what you said so that we all be in the same page as you?
Okay, what I was basically saying is just like let's say you have a function that adds two numbers, right? That function is separate from maybe the class. It's just a function on itself, and I'm supposed to give it two variables, then it returns the sum, right? So in the first step, which is the arrange, you're going to declare the two variables you want to add, right? So you're going to say let's say int x is equals to 5 and int y is equals to, let's say, 7. And that's, by doing that, you've already done the arrange part, right? The second part is the act, which is basically running the function now. So say, let's say a function is called what? Add two numbers. So in the second step, you just do a variable, let's say now b is equals to add two numbers and then pass those values. So you've done the second part, which is the act. Then you go to the third part, which is the assert, making the assertion that whatever value you got from that, calling that function is what you expect, what you'd expect from from that function, that is. So like just do the assertion, which is now the expect part. So basically arrange, act, and then assert, which is basically what you have on that screen.
Okay, cool. So if I may try to like ask like a total beginner. So when we talk about arranging, does this mean we arrange it from our test file or from wherever we are declaring our function or something?
Arrange is just a shorthand for just declaring your variables. The variables you're going to test on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so basically doing like x is equals to 1 and y is equals to 2, you've done the arrange part. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for that insight.
Andy, could you kindly maybe run your tests? There's something that I may want us to see about the group statement. Could you kindly just run the test and let's see what the output will be?
Okay. Every time I run, it keeps telling me this. Just say Flutter run test.
I think you just supposed to write Flutter test.
Okay.
And then if the option is whether you want to test one specific file or you have multiple.
So it fails.
I think maybe the reason may be that you are using the group statement is not actually a test. So what you are expected to do is, as I said, the group function is basically its work is to group several tests. So what I would have expected you to do is to have your test inside the group and not expect the first one. Maybe if you want to test the initial thing, maybe just comment out line number 6 and copy the whole of test and put it inside the group.
The whole of test.
I'm done, Vic.
Yes.
Inside that group, right, there's that statement for expect. Oh, that's not useful.
Yeah. So what I would have done, I don't know if Candy can allow me to share my screen for just a minute.
Yeah, sure, you can.
I don't think I have. Oh, okay, so. I don't think I have the permission yet.
Sorry, let me grant you permission. Yeah, you can share now.
Okay. So, okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Oh, not yet. Okay. If it's visible, then it's okay. So this is an example of I have a function called is email valid, which basically looks like this. It's just a regular expression matcher that will match any string it's given to see if it matches this. Basically, it checks if you have this and then an @ and then something and then dot something. So this is how I would have expected you to have done that. I'm testing the email validator against many tests. So in the first, so my group will just be email validator, just to validate so that I just group all the email validation rules against this. Basically just groups them, all the tests together. Then the first test will be like an email should have like an @ symbol. So in the first expect, oh, now I remember this is called the expect statement. Expect the first thing to be basically the actual, and then this is called a matcher, which will match the actual and basically try to see. So the first thing is expect, then I've just directly called this function, not as I think someone had contributed to say that I'm supposed to declare things on top and then tear down in the bottom. But basically here I'm taking a shortcut. So here is email valid. I just call is email valid directly. And then expect it to be false because this email doesn't have an @ symbol. And then I can also just within the same group of email validator, I say that I expect an email should have a dot symbol. If it doesn't, then it doesn't fail. So if I write John Doe at Google and then com without a dot, then expect that to fail. Then the last test is an email should have both an @ and a dot symbol, which I don't think it's very descriptive. It should have them at a specific point. But if I have John Doe at google.com, then that should be true. The email validation should pass. So group will just group multiple statements. It's not a test itself. It's just a way of grouping several tests.
And oh, thank you. And you can also like write your test without grouping them, right?
Yeah, you can write a test without grouping them, but it's encouraged because maybe in one test you may want to test several scenarios. Like for example, in this I'm testing several scenarios where I do without an @ I do without a dot. What if I do with both? Maybe for example, I can write another test here. Sorry, I think my keyboard is misbehaving somehow. And try something that starts with an @ and doesn't. Basically, this will have both an @ and a dot, but it doesn't. They're not in the right position. It should not be the first element or something like that. Then I would expect this to be false. So you see, I am grouping everything that is email validation related. The thing is, in most cases, the reason why you have the group statement is that in most cases you will test different scenarios of the same thing. See, this is only just one function I'm testing, but I'm testing it against very different scenarios. That's why you have them in a group, but you can still have a test without a group. I think that would still work.
Okay, great. More clear now. Thank you so much, Danvik.
I'm Danvik.
Yeah.
On the left side of the screen, right?
Yeah.
You have what looks like run buttons. Does that mean you can run each individual test?
Yeah, I think you can run an individual tests.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's taking a bit of time, but yeah. One test. So you can run one at a time if you need to.
Oh, so.
Okay. Then you can continue present.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can learn from me. From you. Do we have any questions for on the unit test? Any clarification from anyone who's probably lost? Yes, no, yes. But basically what we mean in that, like, that's how we just write tests in units, right? Like nothing much, nothing in depth. Okay, cool. So for the next type of testing that we wanted to go on for today, the widget tests. So what exactly do we mean by widget testing? Considering that we know everything in Flutter, they say is a widget. So in my understanding, a widget test will focus on testing the Flutter widgets in isolation. They help ensure that the UI components of your application render correctly and behave as expected. Anyone with more insights on what widget tests are, or they've written a widget test before, maybe you can go ahead.
From my limited experience on widget tests, what they usually do is, let's say you have an app bar and your app bar has a piece of text and it says, let's say my app bar, right? What a widget test will do, it will ensure you've painted the scaffold, that is like the whole thing that contains the app bar. And then it will go and check for the widget itself that's supposed to contain whatever you're trying to test for. So let's say the upper now, like it will go and check for the upper widget itself, and then you'll have you'll have what you'll be expecting from that widget, which is the text, and you'll now do the comparison to see if the text corresponds to whatever you're expecting. Give me a minute, I'm getting.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you, Augustine, for that. Do you have like an sample example that we could check?
I have an example. Again, I'd like to present. Okay. So I don't know if I have enough time to maybe run the application, but I have a login form that I am expecting when the if I have not completed the text field and the password field, it will the button, the login button will not be enabled until I basically put something in those two. So this is my logic for the login form. Yeah, so this is the widget I'm testing, the login form widget. So the login form widget has the first the first form field, the text form field, which takes an email address, and check basically whether the email is valid. And then the second widget is the password field. And this field basically is required. And then I have logic here to check. Whenever I change the form, I'm checking whether the form is valid. So basically, if I call the form current state validate, it will return either true or false on whether the form is valid. This is just on change for the form. And then, so when the form is valid, basically I've just put an empty function here on pressed. Basically, we know that for a button in Flutter, if the on pressed is null, then that means that button is disabled. And when on pressed is has a function, the button will be enabled for the user to click. So in this test of mine, I am, first of all, to run widget tests, we have something called test widgets, which is basically the function that we'll call to test a widget. And it comes with the parameter called a widget tester parameter, which you can use to basically initialize the application. So here I am pumping a widget is basically just run that application. In this instance, I'm just running the application and then I'm putting in the login form widget, which is basically just this single widget. I'm putting it in a scaffold, and that's all. Then first of all, the next thing I do is I find those. So widget tester has also, Flutter has a function called find, I don't know where it is located. I think it's just in Flutter test, we have a find functionality that will find a widget based on a given thing. So for this example, after pumping the widget, basically starting the application, I find any widget that is of type text field. So we know that we have two text fields, the email and the password. So, and then using the tester, which is the widget tester we got here when we're starting out, we enter the text. For example, for this one, I have, basically it will return two widgets. I think this is where I should have started. The first widget is this finder finds two text fields. So the first one, I enter John Doe, and then the second one, I don't enter anything. I just like put in an empty string. And then pumping, and in this instance again, when I pump, that means I just flash all the changes that I've made in these lines to the UI. And then finally, I find a button. I try to find a button which is of type elevated button, and the widget and its on press is null. So so this returns a finder. So in my expect, I have the button finder. Expect it to find one widget which is of type elevated button and has the on pressed of null. So that means that it will run the application and then enter these two inputs, and then it will look for that for an elevated button which has a null on pressed function, which it should expect one. So it will look through the widget tree and look for an elevated button and check that it has the on pressed is null. So that is that's basically how it works. So if I run this, I should expect it to be one. If I find it to be 0, then I know my test has failed. And then in the next instance, in the next test, I'm trying to now test whether when I enter the valid values, then I expect to find that it's not null. basically. The onPressed function is not null. So in this instance, line number 32, just the same as before. I'm looking for those two widgets, text form widget. And then I expect to find two. Basically, this I should have also done it there. So I expect to find two text field widgets. If I find more than two, then my test fails. So basically, if I go and add another text form field, then it will fail. Then I go to the first one and enter the text john@email.com. Then I expect to find a widget with the text john@email.com finds one widget. It should find an email, a widget that has that text. The next step is to enter another text in the password field and basically look through the widget tree, see if there's any widget that has the text password. If it finds any widget that is of type text field and has the text password, then something is correct there. If not, then it will fail again. Then I also flash the changes to the UI. And then finally I test again and make sure now this time it should find 0 widgets of type elevated button, and it onPressed is null. So basically in this instance, it will have, if I run the application and enter the correct password, the elevated button will now be active and someone can click on it. This is just an example. I don't know if I have captured everything correctly, unless anyone has a question.
Yeah, I think you've captured everything correctly. I'm actually now curious to see how the test runs.
Okay. So remember that this test will not run, it is not like a driver test which will open the app and you will see everything being run. This one will just run the widget in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a minute. So as you can see, now this test has passed. So basically that means that everything that I have been expecting here is actually working.
So so when we talk about the widget test, this means that the test runs from the logic of your code base, right? Not from how it's interacting with the users, or rather how the user is interacting on the application, right?
Yeah, so I think you have it correctly. Sorry for going offline a bit. So this will just run your widget behind the scenes, and it will try to do whatever we have said we have expected it to do, and then it will give me the output. I think I had an example of a driver test, but I can't find it. Next time, maybe when we're discussing driver test, maybe I'll run one so that we can see. But basically, if I try to now run my, this may take time. So Candy, if you have anything else to be discussing, maybe you can be going on. But I'll just run to make sure that now what we have been expecting is actually what we are seeing.
Yeah. Thank you. As we wait for it to finish running, maybe this is where anybody can comment on it. I see Douglas say nice for the find dot by my widgets. Yeah. If anyone has a comment they can throw in, feel free to contribute.
So there are different kinds of finders. So this is not something that I can cover in this presentation while someone asks a question. So there are different kinds of finders. You'll find by widget predicate will expect you to give to have a function where it's basically like
sorry, you're you're breaking again. We can't hear you, Danvik.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So so I was saying the different kinds of finders. So we have here, you can see one finder that I've used here is by a predicate. Predicate just means I'll provide a function, and if that function is found to be, it will traverse the whole tree and see, and try to find if there's any widget that matches these parameters. Basically, where the widget type is of type text field. That is one type of finder. And then using that finder, the finder will return basically an array. So the first find, so that this array of finders will have the one at 0, which will be the first text field, will be at 0, and then this one will be at 1. Then there's another kind of finder. So another kind of finder here is like find widget with text. So here I'm finding any widget that is of type text field and has this text. And you remember here, using this finder again, we put in that text. So we are just expecting that after entering john@email.com, I'm expecting that now there should be a widget on the UI that has that text. And then it should expect to find 1. If it finds 2, then that is wrong again. The function will fail. And then that's one finder. That's a two kind of finders. This is by predicate, which is basically the same. And then there's one find by key. So if you have maybe a very complex UI and you want to find a specific widget, you may just also use a key and define a key here. A key, which you can basically use to find that widget. Keys are easier to find. Instead of traversing the whole tree, a key will just basically identify from the key, it will just identify that key. I can have a key here like key, and then, I don't know, you can just maybe a value key, and then put here as password. Then if I go and look now, if I want to find this widget, I'll not do it, but I'll just pretend that I am. So this is another finder which I can say find dot by key, and then I'll give that key. And then it will basically go and find that widget by that key. So there are different kinds of finders. If I click here, you can see that there are different kind of, you can find by different, by type, by widget, by basically all this, by descendants and all that. Find descendant, find image. So there are different kinds of finders. So it's just about that for a widget test. And if we look at now our function here, our UI here, we'll see that it's actually working as expected, and we enter something that is valid here. No, that is not correct, but it will work. And I enter here, the login form, the login button will become active. And if the form is not valid, the login button is not active. So this actually just tests and makes sure that that logic actually works. So unless someone has a question, I think that is the end of my widget tests.
Okay, thank you, Danvik, for that. We have Mark Thomas, whose hand is raised. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hello, So I was just asking about when you were displaying your app on the Chrome. So I was asking because right now I'm learning about forms and whatever. So what you have done, you have validated. That's cool, but now when I've seen like when you are entering text into that text field, it immediately changed. So I was asking, how did you do that? Because I was contemplating about my apps need to do that too. So if you enter strings or anything in that text field, it will immediately change. Yeah, that way.
Oh, that's
exactly.
okay. So that is that's something on Flutter. I think you'll use this. I don't know where I have put it, but I think I can just write here. I think it's called validation mode, something like that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's somewhere in here. Oh, I haven't. Don't know why my auto suggest is not working. Auto validate mode. So it's called the auto validate mode. So if I set the auto validate mode to be auto validate mode to be always, that means it will immediately the user starts interacting with it. Oh, okay, that is different. Let me just check and confirm. Yeah, so there are different types of auto validate. Always will just always validate. Whatever you do, it will always validate. The next one is if you disable, it will be disabled, obviously. And then there's another one called on user interaction, which I think is usually the default. I'm not very sure. This should be the default. Basically, it will be the form will if I rerun this, just do that. So in this case, if I say on user interaction, means that when user interacts with that field, that's when it will start validating. So there are different kinds of validation mode. In this example, you can see here that it is here. It's not validating. I have not put an email and it's not complaining, and I have not put anything. When immediately I start putting something, then it starts validating. You can put this either on the field itself. The auto validate mode can be either on the field itself or on the form as a whole. When I put on the form as a whole, then that means it will validate every field. But the ideal way is to put it at the field level. Yeah, if you have gotten the gist of it, then I think that is all. So it's just out of the validation mode. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I got it.
But does it also the auto validation? I think I saw somebody saying that it comes with the text form field package. We can't hear you again.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Sorry. So the auto validate mode, if you put it on the form, it will run for the whole form. You see, I've put on interaction, on user interaction, but on the whole form. If I do that, it will cover the whole form. If I migrate it down here, it will check for user interaction on the form, on the field itself. So basically, this auto validate mode is basically a Flutter thing. It doesn't come with a package specifically. It's part of just Flutter on forms and fields.
Okay, great.
Any form field or any form will have that option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think somebody is asking if the project is on GitHub. Is it on GitHub?
Not currently. Not currently. I can have it hosted there, but not currently.
Do you write for multiple cases?
For example?
To go on a tangent, like if you are writing something on lead code, and you are trying to test it, at first they'll test it on like 3 cases, right? So they'll tell you you've passed all the 3 test cases that you've provided. But then when you try to submit, you'll be told maybe like whatever code you wrote passed like maybe 1,500 of the 2,000 test cases that have been defined that you have to pass before you submit, right? Maybe in like a real world scenario, when you're trying to test maybe like a login page, you'll want to test for like multiple types of credentials, right? So like if you're writing one test, how do you make that test like account for all the other types of credentials, or maybe like edge cases that may happen, so that you know that your tests are comprehensive?
So in that case, I would just advise maybe that you just try to test for those edge cases. Just like try to test, let's say, for example, you are testing the length of that of the password, whether it contains maybe several characters. Just test for each and then see that. I know there may be so many, but you're just testing for an instance of each. So you don't have to write so many. I don't know if you're getting me, but you just test for the edge cases and just make sure that they won't fail those edge cases. There's no need for you to test for maybe the valid value, for example.
Okay, so test for the like most likely breaking point. So you test for that, and then
because that is what your testers will do. If you have a QA team, that they will try to break. You see, like the work of the QA is try to break your code. So if you can work to make sure that anyone trying maybe to enter, maybe you have given a field and you want it to only accept numbers, and then maybe your QA will try and put a character, put something that is not a number, and then try to see. So you test for those edge cases. Then if all the edge cases are caught, then that means you're up. The valid ones will go.
Oh, okay, I think that checks out. Thanks.
Okay. And then, yeah, someone mentioned, I don't know who mentioned, because I was presenting at the time. Usually you see I'm doing a lot of repetition here. So in a good test, instead of doing this once, I can declare all the functionality on top here that will find the first widget and the second, the first text field and the second text field, so that I don't do in every function here. I don't find the fields again and find and find and find. You just find once and then use that finder to now perform the other tests. And then as I think he also had mentioned, now after doing the test, you also do a teardown. A teardown is where you now dispose of any widgets that you've been using or any variables that you've been using that may just end up using your memory. So you'll have a put up, or I don't know, the preparation stage, I forget the specific term, but you basically set up, you test, and then you tear down, get rid of all the functionalities. If I had done that, then I wouldn't have done used this written these things twice, here and here. I can just like put it once and then repeat, use it again and again.
Okay. Is this what Douglas has mentioned, like set up and tear down and set up all and tear down all?
Yes, I think he's very correct. Yeah, they set up and tear down.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Danvik, for the presentation. And then I have a question, like what's your advice on especially unit and widget tests? Let's say, for example, you have like a really huge code base, like how would you go about? Because I can imagine this would be really huge. I mean, you're writing a whole lot of tests. So what would be your take on writing tests, on writing either widget or unit on a large code base?
That's a very tricky, especially if you have maybe a QA team that will have to go through every of your widgets or of your whole application. I would just test for edge cases and test and see that the edge cases are actually, sorry about the noise. I would just test and see that the edge cases are working. So if you have a maybe your app works, maybe the main functionality of your app is to say the chat application. I would test the chat functionality. I will not test maybe the login or anything. You test the things that matter the most to you. That is what I would advise. Though I am not, I am not QA, but that is what I would advise. Just test for the things that are most likely. Yeah, there's someone here who has said put everything on Crashlytics. let Crashlytics find the errors for you. I wouldn't in any advice that I'd put to a programmer is always have something like this, like Crashlytics, because you may have edge cases on very specific, especially when it comes to now interacting where your Dart code may not have problems with any specific device, but maybe you're calling APIs in Android, and that specific Android version does not have that functionality. You see, you'll have problems. So that is how, using Crashlytics, I wouldn't do an app without. My background is was in backend, where I have a log file, which in case of an error, it will just log to that file, and I'll come and go through the log file and find errors. How about a mobile app? If you don't have something like Crashlytics or Sentry or Datadog or anything like that running there, you'll not know of any errors because it's running on a user's hand. There's no log file that you can go and check. So this by Mark Thomas, that is I would do that first before I even start writing tests. Or someone had also asked the logic for my to check whether the login button is enabled. So basically I've put an unchanged on my form widget, which will just flip this this Boolean in case the code is valid, and then this is what I'm checking down here to see if it's valid or not. So I think that answers your question, I think, Douglas. I think that is the end of my presentation. I don't know if Candy has anything to add.
I think that's amazing. That's really amazing. Thank you, Danvik, for taking us through it all. Also, a bit something on Crashlytics. I think Crashlytics is pretty amazing. However, there are some time I faced a challenge when I was writing like integration tests, where I needed to like, or rather to just push my code to Crashlytics, not writing integration tests. Just wanted to like see how it's going to like a bypass and login and all. However, I came to realize if maybe you're not using like the Google login, then Crashlytics is not able to like bypass the kind of login structure that you have. Let's say you have like written your own login then it's very difficult. I had somebody say that you need to write a script to help, I think, your code to like pass that. I don't know what that really meant precisely, but I found that my code base, my application could not be tested. It was only going through the splash screen, and that was it. And then everything passes, but then nothing else. It doesn't give me full reports.
I think Crashlytics is not really a testing thing, but rather Crashlytics is basically your last wall of defense. Basically, it will report errors that have already happened. In case your app maybe like fails in production, or you are running it locally and it fails, that is when Crashlytics will help. Crashlytics is not for testing, it is for basically catching any errors that occur during the usage of the application, and then send it to Crashlytics. So it is not for testing. If you're using Crashlytics, you are trying to use Crashlytics for testing, that's not its purpose. I don't know if you are getting it.
Yes.
Also, I would advise, if you're using, I think someone has their hand raised up. Just go ahead, Douglas. Douglas, have you raised your hand?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, so I also faced another problem. I think around the same lines with Candy. So where like you're using a custom authentication system, and then you want to know who is the currently logged in user, or who is the user who got affected. So I don't know if in Crashlytics there is a way to like set the user context, or set who is the user who got affected by this error.
I think
just a question. I'm not really sure. I haven't used Crashlytics.
I think it can, but I don't know Crashlytics. What I would use, for something that I would use Sentry rather than Crashlytics. Sentry is, it's good for native errors. If an error has very detailed instructions, but if you use something like Sentry, it will give a very detailed list. Let me just check. I'll check on a application, maybe. Just try and open it here.
You're breaking a bit, Danvik.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So I think I heard something. I'm not very sure. Let me just check. This is where I'm not very. Wait a moment. So I think you can do this once in my, just ignore the rest of the code, especially if you see it as spaghetti. But basically, usually you do this once your user logs in, you set the user identifier just to identify the user, and then you can set the user ID, or set user ID, identifier and ID. Okay, and then you can set user properties like name, like basically for this is a school application, so I set the school ID and the school name. You can set these properties. The problem is when I go to Crashlytics, I don't usually seem to find them. But when I using Sentry.io, then in every crash, it will show you who exactly faced this issue, what time. Sentry is very detailed. It will show you even the battery percentage at the time of that failure, and such things, were they connected to the internet, and so on and so forth. So I think I would use Sentry to get more detailed information if I want more detailed information. For my usage, I usually use both in the same. I use both Sentry and and Firebase Crashlytics. So I don't know if that has answered your question, but you can basically set these properties. You can set multiple user properties, and I don't know where exactly you can query those. Maybe you can connect your Crashlytics to BigQuery, and then I don't know whether if they'll be sent there. I'm not very sure.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think the one for Sentry looks a bit better.
Yeah, and it's actually very detailed. If I showed you like an error on Sentry, it has every detail of that user. It will show you everything about that phone, the specific device, the specific Android version, the specific, so that you know in case that error only occurs on a specific time, on a specific device, on a specific, maybe, let's say things to do with network, when the network is, maybe the Wi-Fi is not good or something like that, so that you just know this is the specific problem that was occurring. Sentry is very detailed. It will give you a very detailed error report.
I have a question, Danvik, on
Yeah.
Sentry. I know like it gives all detail and all, which is nice. Let's say you've upgraded your application to another version, maybe to fix like, the previous bugs, and then the same user still is facing the same problems because they probably haven't upgraded to the current version. Does it also show you like the version that they are on
Yes. You can usually what I do. Don't know if I have any. Okay, I have some error here. So this is an example of an error that has occurred on Sentry. If I come here, let's say, for example, I don't know if my network has problem. So basically, it will give you all this information, like the device information, and down here it will give you basically the version will be here. You can see the release version and the build number, so you'd know that this is the version that of the error that has happened. And then it will show a very detailed report of what has happened. It will also show, in case you logged anything to the console, it will also show. You can see if I've done any HTTP request, it will show. And basically everything about that user, including the permissions that you are given, and all other information, low memory, is it like the amount of memory that is there, so you can get a very detailed error report that you can be able to see where exactly what is the time for that user, for that specific error, so that in case it's related to any of those, you can just be able to solve them. Can I hope you chop off this part of this presentation so that I don't get into problems in case I've showed anything that is sensitive, but I'm not sure. I'm sure there is nothing sensitive there somehow.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we are learning about tests, and then all of a sudden we are learning about other tools, the crash reporting tools, I believe, you know. So I don't think there is any problem at all.
Okay. So, in case, I think that is the end of my presentation. Anything else? Any question? I think we have covered everything in the chat.
Any question on unit and widget tests? No, yes, no, yes. I would also want to like know how you guys are feeling about these things. So please feel free to like to just mention it, you know, and also tell us what you're looking forward to hearing. However, thank you so much, Danvik. Thank you, Augustine. I've forgotten the name of the other guy. But it's always a pleasure to like, you know, interact with all of you and learn from you all. So for the next session, we're going to like dig deep into what integration tests are, and you know, try run a couple of tests and see how they interact, and yeah, we all get happy at the end of it all. and I hope to like maybe something else will probably come up. We'll probably start discussing about like the previous session we had on the app architecture. We also ended up talking about state management. So it's always a learning curve. It's always something we get to interact on, which is nice. Yeah, it's been real. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time. I think our time is up. Yeah, we only have like 6 more minutes, but if anyone has any more question or want to contribute, please feel free. Otherwise, we can end our session here.
Yeah, mine is just to thank everyone for attending. It's good to have people around during this Wednesday vibes. And the advantage of Wednesday vibes is that you will see people fumbling and doing everything, because this is not a presentation per se, but we are discussing. Everything is open. If you have maybe even, I remember when you were talking about state management and architecture, we had a lot of discussion and opinionated discussions. If you have like, you can interject, you can ask a question. It is not like I'm presenting or anything. We'll just be discussing, and everyone's opinion is basically gets into the presentation, and it's actually it's actually a very nice forum. It's just a forum where we discuss things. That's all. It's just that we are discussing very specific things, but you'll see, as Kendi has said, things usually spill over and you start learning new things, which is also nice.
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
There's a question, Kendi.
Yeah, someone is asking where can we find previous presentations. So it's gonna be uploaded on our YouTube channel. Sam takes care of that. Once it's up, I'll let you guys know it on our Flutter Kenya YouTube channel. So yeah. So it's been real, guys. Thanks for the vibes. This is where we hang out every Wednesday. Yeah, see you next Wednesday for the integration tests. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, good evening, all of you.